I think many of you know we've had many updates over the last 3 years that in Policy Committee we have been working diligently to revise Policy 707 and the use of school facilities, keeping in mind that Spring Forward is about the education and the school first, but also wanting the members and affiliated members of our community to have access to use that to keep their programs alive, which in very many ways we recognize benefit our students as well. So we have spent a lot of time revising the language, beginning with all the way from the purpose. As you'll see, as we go through all of the slides, you'll see we just tore everything apart and built it back up. The fees, which I'm sure everybody wants to get to those slides right away, but give us a little bit of time and we'll get to those. You'll see that we tried to keep in mind the information that was provided to us by Mr. Cooper, who used to be here, by Mr. Hunter, and really also had Mr. Fink look at it. So none of these numbers that you see here were made in isolation or made just by one person. It was a group effort, and many eyes went on here, and many discounts were provided to try to make it more palatable. So hopefully you'll see that information as we're going through, especially those of you that were up earlier and that had seen some of the earlier drafts. We made further revisions to try to make it work for everybody. Okay? So we'll get started. Did you want me to start with the
purpose and the parts?
Yeah, so you'll see that the purpose, the board recognizes the needs of parent and community to utilize district facilities for educational, cultural, recreational, civic, or social purposes when they are not scheduled for district programs or maintenance. District facilities are intended for use primarily by the schools and district and then by the residents and community groups which are located within the district's boundaries. So this revised policy will include procedures for granting permission to use the school facilities, the activity classification groupings, the fees and charges established by the business office, the rental fees and service charges, they will be specific and on an addendum that you'll see later in this presentation, the application approval procedures and guidelines, and the insurance requirements for facility usage. Okay. That's one. Do you want me to go right to?
Keep going.
Yeah. Okay. You'll follow up when it gets hairy. Okay. We also did a policy review, and you'll see that the initial policy was adopted all the way back March 25th, 1991. As I'm sure many of you were very young at that time, I was still in college. It was a long time ago. It needed revisions. The current policy was last revised May 24th of 2010. Again, 9 years ago. That's a chunk of time. So you'll see the added addendum 707C addresses the custodial charges for PTAs, home and school associations, the Athletic Booster Club, the Spring Forward Music Association, and the Spring Forward Educational Foundation. On April 11th of 2016, this policy was listed on the Policy Committee agenda. That's 2016, folks. We're now in 2019. So it's important that we look at this thoroughly. One of the first things we did was look at the local districts. What are they doing? How are they doing use of facilities in comparison to what we're doing? So we looked at Pottsgrove, Central Bucks, Boyertown, Downingtown, Owen-J, PV, Methacton. We really tried to hit a number of districts, some that were similar to Spring Forward and some that were a little bit different, to see how they created their policies, what information they had included in there, and what their fee schedules looked like as well. I also want to comment there, we also looked at the 422 Sportsplex. Remember, we looked at that as well, and the new facility that offers rentals. I don't remember what that's called. What is it called? All Sports. All Sports. We looked at those two as well. So even beyond school districts, we looked at those to really look at the numbers. Okay, I think, are we up to page 5? Yeah, it's your turn. Take a turn. Okay.
I don't want to break this. You already broke it. Okay, so I'll walk you through some of the substantive changes. So application for rental, so we try to clarify the time. You'll see up on the screen it says 3 of 28. So for board members that have the policy in front of them, there's 28 guidelines. That's number 3. So if you wanted to go see the specific language on clarification for time frame, then we changed 60 days notice from 30. That's 4 of 28. And then finally for the applications establishing some close dates, because as Mrs. Zowski said, we have first of school, and want to make sure that we have our employees taken care of certain days where we're not open based upon the facility rental piece for the certain groups. The next was the appropriate use of facilities. There had been some questions in there under number 5 of 28 on the clarity for the use of the open flame, canned heat for different events. We adjusted the end time back to 9:30 on weekdays and 10:30 on weekends so that things could get wrapped up by 10:30 and 11 for our employees. And then we clarified for any misuse that happens where people are not following along with our requirements to the loss of privilege for the organization if there are some extreme circumstances of not following along or sharing registrations or clarity on the safety and security issues as well. Okay. Then we get onto the fees established by the business office. Already in the current policy, there were 2 special circumstances by the business office. That's with the YMCA for the before and after school care, and then our summer camps. So we added 2 additional areas in here for the business office to, in essence, to negotiate rates based upon the structure for long-term facility rental agreements. So organizations that know they're using them for a long period of time over a current piece to sit with the chief financial officer, take a look at what the needs are and the availability, and then make some decisions based upon the usage. And then finally for PIAA postseason use of the facilities, try to clarify how that would work out in terms of the outside groups using the facilities. That's long-term and PIAA. So the next one here has to do with building door security during rentals, which I know is never a topic for anyone here today in terms of the evenings and coming in and handles missing and all that other fun stuff because of school security. But the clarity here is doors may not be propped open for any reason and the main entrance area cannot be unattended. That the doors are locked in the evenings depending upon the grouping, and just try to clarify that as best we could. As you guys know, with what's going on in social media and out in the society with people coming in and out of buildings, and now we hear that some people are now purposely testing doors in different areas. It's something that's got to be addressed, and we want to make sure that is consistent for us across the policy. It's not a change, it's just more clarity on the language there from our current policy. I know some people felt there was a change this year coming in, but it wasn't. It was more actually we're following along with the policy. Get to the classifications. As we said, there's 4 classifications. Technically, there's probably 5 because we've split out Class 1 into 1A and 1B. 1A being the actual buildings themselves, the principal oversight on the use of facilities for facilities that are going, organizations and, for events, thank you. Events that are going on right directly from the building, whether it's a contest under Mr. McDaniel, or whether they're regular concerts that are going on as a part of our building, or the principal's calling an evening event, those type of things. That's what the 1A is, and then closely associated that will be 1B. So for 1A here, you'll see the language of rental fees and service charges, which there will be a description of those 2 items a little later, but it just lays out where the how the fees and the charges are for the 1A group. That last statement there talks about 1A groups, buildings that are groups that are having events where all of the money's going out. So that's a question about fundraising, and right now the recommendation coming through on that is if there's a 1A group that has a fundraiser and all of the money is going out of the district, the recommendation is to at least cover half of the service charge that will be associated on a weekend for what the service charge covers. Half of that of the 1B group to cover that charge, as opposed to it all going out because of the cost that it comes to the district for having the event on a Saturday or a Sunday. Into 1B, these are our booster clubs, for examples, and I know it's small font up there. So this is, again, no rental fees at all associated with 1B, and service charges apply for 1B activity based upon the chart that we'll share with you in a little while, and primarily weekend usage, including fundraisers to cover the cost. So it talks there a little about fundraisers. All of these organizations, all their money seems to come right back into and support the programs that they're designed for. And as was mentioned, the bottom bullet down there at the bottom talks about the Class 1B organizations. The memorandum of understanding that Mrs. Zazowski mentioned before had 4 free service charge organizations as a part of the MOU that took place in 2010. This here in the proposal coming from the committee is having 1 event each year without service charges. That's again coming from the recommendation. So that MOU would get wrapped into that, and instead of 4, be 1. You'll see that later on when you look at the numbers. Then finally, Class 2 organizations. These are our community recreation leagues, community theater groups, service organizations, and so there's no rental fees, and Class 2 would have a service charge apply for activities based upon the schedule for charges that we'll share with you. Class 3, the organizations that are more than less than 50% Spring-Forward related, and they may have paid coaches as a part of that, or paid people inside the organization to use the facilities. So the AAU basketball teams will be an example of that. And then finally, Class 4 is everyone else outside of 1, 2, and 3 that hasn't been categorized to date, that are outside the organization, that are still in the community, but not meeting those classifications of Class 2 more than 50% and nonprofit, and Class 3 larger than 50%. I'm sorry, less than 50% of the population. Yeah, you take this, yeah.
Okay, so popping over to some of the, I can't lower that anymore. I'm going to break that mic.
Don't break it.
It's going to break me. So we're going to define the difference between rental fees and service charges. Service charges, well, we'll start with rental fees. Rental fees are defined as fixed charges for the use of facilities. That covers deterioration, wear and tear, those types of more global, more general fees that we're saying are part of that, okay? The service charges are specifically related to the costs for using the facility, the cost that it costs the district that are accrued because that is being used. So what the taxpayers are paying are those service charges. So we're not asking, as you'll see from most of the representatives of the groups here, we're not asking you to absorb the full service charges, but we need to get a little bit closer and pull that. I mean, it's gone up since 2010, right? It's gone up. We need to get a little bit closer, and we need to not burden the taxpayers, but we also want to keep your activities going. So we're trying to find a balance, and you'll see that as we go through. I had much higher hopes when we started, and they've come way down, so you'll see that. So the service charges clearly are defined as the combined cost of the custodial employee rate and benefits and the cost for the utilities, the electricity, the water, the sewer, any supplies or cleaning costs per 1 hour block of time. Each organization will be responsible for paying both the rental fee and service charges for every use of facility as classified in one of those 4 groups or 5, as Dr. Roach explained. If a rental and facility usage for a single event exceeds the capacity of a single custodial employee, additional service charges would apply or may apply and may be added in to cover the cost of that second person, which makes sense, right? So, okay, so moving on to the next piece of this then. The rental fees and service charges. Thinking that you know, representing your groups, where you fall in line with those different classifications. 1A, no rental fees, no service charges, except, as we mentioned, fundraisers for out-of-district contributions. So if everything's going to be going out, we've asked them to absorb just half of the service charge, not the full service charge, and no rental fee. 1B, no rental fees and no weekday service charges, but service charges on the weekends would apply. So with each classification, you see that there's a slight adjustment. Class 2, no rental fees, but service charges on weekdays and weekend usage. And again, those service charges are adjusted, correct? Is that where we have the... For 2, that's where we have the hometown discount. Yes, on the weekdays. You'll see that we've brought those numbers way down. Class 3, rental fees and service charges based upon the rental fee and service charge schedule, and that's for Class 4 also. Okay, so the closer you are to Spring-Forward, that's going to dictate what your service charges and your rental fees are. Okay. All right, so the rental fees schedule comparison, the current fee versus the new fee. Are we taking a look at this? Current Class 1B, current policy Class 1B, new policy, Class 2, current policy, and Class 2, new policy. There's no figure on there. No figure. Okay? But when we go over to that's rental fees, right? Rental fees, 1A, 1B, and 2. 3 and 4, we know rental fees apply. Service charges, which include the labor, wages, taxers, peasers for one employee equivalency, electricity usage, water, sewage, trash, consumables, cleaning supplies, line painting on the outside, if applicable, does not include equipment facility depreciation fees. Remember, I said a little while ago, that's more wrapped into the rental, right? But the service charges are the specific things that you can quantify, okay? So that's what those are, and here's what they look like. Do you want to go over those at that point? Okay.
So we try to do a similar comparison to the previous screen. So on the left, where it's left side, kind of looks like a light blue, Class 1B weekend current policy and Class 1B weekend new policies. You can see the rate difference. It says 0 or 50 because based upon the previous MOU, but for no service charge pieces, if they did have to pay, it would be 50. The rate was $50 an hour for the service charge, and the new policy for 1B on the weekends is 55, 65, 60, or 65 based upon the facility on your left. The K-4 facility being a little less than the 567 equaling 10 to 12 because of the sheer size, and the cleaning piece 8 and 9 kind of in the middle there. That's the comparison to current policy and new policy. We felt this is the information people want to see the difference in terms of the rates. Although the board, you have the copy of the policy as well. In the middle there, that goes to Class 2. There's your weekday, current policy, nothing, zeros all the way through. And so there's a change there with the weekday, new policy, 14, 16, 15, 16 rates there. So that's a during the week hourly rate for use of the service charge tied to the rentals during the week in the buildings. There's your difference from the previous. And then going all the way out to the far right with the Class 2 weekend current policy, all 50 down, and Class 2 weekend new policy, there are newer rates, 75, 85, 80, 85, based upon the facility size and usage. So we have the employee cost, which is consistent across all buildings, and then the size of the building, because of the number of people that may be coming in and out, is dictated by the change there, and the difference is dictated by the electricity usage and the consumption and the other items that Mrs. Zowski shared. So that's the overall comparison. Knowing our audience tonight, we didn't prepare 3 and 4. We would share that with you to keep this on a tight timeline. Here's the overall service charge schedule. So in a nutshell, on your left is all the facility sizes along the top, Class 1B, 2, 3, and 4. And that's it in its entirety, what that chart looks like. 1A is not on there. 1B, weekday, no charge. Weekend, you can see the numbers going down. Class 2, weekend, which we just described, and Class 2 weekend, and then 3 and 4 all the way through. So we put together a couple examples here. So here's 2 examples so you can kind of see a comparison. So hypothetically, here is a Class 1B rental that's going to use the 9th grade center for 10 hours on a Saturday, both the gym and the cafeteria. It's a fundraiser, and all the profits are going back to the organization for Spring Forward students. So what would happen there, current policy, current and new policy, there's no rental fees as was described. The service charge on the weekend, excuse me, is 50, so over 10 hours it's 500. And then on the right it's 55, then over 10 hours is 550. You see the numbers 1 of 4 or 1 of 1. So if this happened to be one of the free ones where there was no service charge applied, that would obviously knock that the dollars down. But I wanted you to see the full piece there. And that's an assumption of there's only 1 employee that we need. Some events get so large you need 2 employees, or you need to bring people in on a second shift depending upon the number of hours. So that may impact cleanup and the overall cost. But we'll try to predict that when the contract comes through for the rental. There's one example. The second example is a hypothetical Class 2 group, which was going to use the 3 different gyms at 3 different schools for 10 weeks over the course of every day of the week, Monday through Sunday. So there's a Monday through Friday at all 3 schools. It would be 3.5 hours a day, and on Saturday and Sunday, 8 hours a day. So work with me horizontally there in terms of school number 1 is a K-4 school, so there's no rental fee as you move yourself across. The service charge on the weekend in the new policy, right in the middle, current policy is 0. With the new policy, there's $14 an hour for the service charge, and then on the weekend, you can see the adjustment from 50 to 75. In the second school in the same organization, they're going to use the 5, 6, 7 center. So again, you work yourself across, no fees, service charges different hourly in the middle, and then you have a different hourly rate than folks are used to on the right side. And the third one will be the 9th grade center or 8th grade center. Work yourself across. They're the same cost, and you can see the end numbers at the bottom in terms of the difference between current and new. So the new charge there in the middle is there, but in the past there was no weekday charge for the service. Now, with that small example of 10 weeks over the course of 3 schools and 7 days a week, it's an additional charge of $7,875. And then you can see the difference in the charge in the bottom between $24,000 and $38,400 for just that same exact example. That's for you to see the impact of the change on a small scale for some organizations. For some, that would be a significant increase in the amount of facility usage they use. So we're at the final slide. That's what I thought was going to happen. All right. So there's 4 addendums that are attached inside the policy all the way at the end. So when you open the policy, it now says page 10 of 10, but there's actually 5 more pages. The first one is the information about certificate of insurance. The second is the hold harmless clause. The third is the actual facility rental fee and service charge schedule. That would be an item that we would plan on revisiting through finance each year to see if we had to adopt. So it wouldn't necessarily be a policy change, it would be an addendum change, but still would get approved each year as a part of that based upon the finances. And then finally, the last piece is the application for the use of school facilities. Okay. So this is the recommendation after 3 years coming out of the committee with many people having feedback and sharing, and it's on the agenda for first reading for consideration.